Welcome back to the Pilot Network podcast. I'm Matt, host of the show. Adam's, of course, out flying the line. And we just want to welcome you back. And as we always do on the Pilot Network podcast, we try to bring you TPN members and business owners and entrepreneurs that are doing something really cool and helping to teach us about something new or bringing a cool product to the forefront. And we really try to look at entrepreneurship through the lens of aviation. And today, of course, is no different. I've got a great guest today. Jeff Van Orsow is the author of the book Alternate Route and a first for TPN. He is a former Division I football player, so NFL. So that's a big deal for us. But we're not here to talk about football, although I do want to hear a little bit about how you came from football player into Air Force pilot and airline pilot as well. So Jeff, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Matt, for having me.
Let's start out with the elephant in the room. So Division I football, it's on the back of the book here. What's that all about? How did you end up doing that, and what's that story?
Started playing football in second grade. It was a passion of mine for a long time, and I was fortunate enough to get a full ride scholarship to Oregon State. I was there for 5 years. I redshirted my first year, and then I was a starter for the next 3 years. We went to 4 bowl games and won them all. Had a great time. And then you had mentioned the NFL. I had an opportunity to be a free agent signing with the Cleveland Browns. So I spent a whole glorious 4 days with them. They said thanks, but no thanks. I did spend 2 years in the Arena League after that with the Spokane Shock. We won the championship game the second year, and I just decided to, quote, retire and follow my other passion, which was flying.
That's awesome. The tryouts and the 2-a-day practices and everything, it just kind of probably started to take a toll after a while, right?
Yeah, and once you got to the Arena League, it was the opportunities were dwindling, and I kind of saw the end of my career coming. And so while I was still young-ish, I wanted to get a jump on aviation, and I jumped into my flight instructor ratings at that point.
Sure. So, you talk about it a little bit in the book, but, for those of you out there who haven't read the book yet, what was your path to aviation? Because obviously you took this detour into professional athletics, and you kind of got a little bit later start on the aviation path. What did that look like, and how did you end up finding that?
Yeah, so my dad was active duty Air Force. He was a B-52 pilot. He did 22 years, full career. So I had kind of that to pique my interest in aviation, but I never had an opportunity to pursue it until I went to college. I found out later in my freshman year that Oregon State had a flying club, and the spring of 2004, I took my first discovery flight, and it kind of the rest was history from there. So I was doing full-time school, playing, practicing, traveling with the football team, a full schedule there, but I was still able to finish my private and my instrument while I was going to college, and then my commercial shortly after college.
Cool. Yeah, that's always tough to do it while you're in the midst of something else. I mean, if breaks in between scheduled flights and those sorts of things, and studying and check rides and whatnot is always a challenge. I know I did my private pilot's license while I was in high school and college. It kind of straddled the two, and I remember how tough that was, just trying to figure out where the next $150 for the next lesson was going to come from, or something like that.
That's right.
I can totally relate. So did you do ROTC in college, or did you do a different commissioning source afterwards?
So I had the opportunity to meet some people in the ROTC program in just my everyday classes, and got a little bit of information from them. So I scheduled an interview with the ROTC recruiter and kind of told them my situation. I was going into my junior year at Oregon State. It was the summertime, so I still had 2 full years left. And the recruiter flat out told me that I wasn't going to be able to compete for a pilot slot, and that athletes don't do well in their program. So I kind of was rejected, left the room a little bit kind of depressed, and was like, man, I really kind of thought that this was the opportunity to take my aviation career to the next level. And so ROTC did not work out. However, I had someone who was in the Guard, F-15s for the Portland, Oregon unit. They do the flyovers for our football games, and they put two and two together. They're like, hey, you know how to fly. You got to meet this pilot. He did the flyovers. I'm like, yeah, absolutely, I'll talk to him. And he was the first person to introduce the option or the opportunity that the Guard and the Reserve have.
That's awesome. And it's how old were you at that point? Because I know there's concerns with, for off the street hires and going to pilot training and waivers and all those sorts of things. Tell us a little bit about what the average person who's considering maybe a little bit later in their career path going towards military aviation. What are those age requirements, and how did that affect you? And what are some things that people don't necessarily know about?
Yeah, currently the age requirement is a maximum age of 35. The minimum age is you have to have a college degree. So that's the average applicant now, I'd still say, is probably about 25 years old. And so for me personally, I found out about the opportunity in the Guard and the Reserve in college. However, the timing in life wasn't right for me. I had my girlfriend, who's now my wife, wasn't too hip on the military. She had her own career that she was trying to pursue. And so I was 20-ish when I found out about the Guard the first time. And then I was about 23 when it came back into my life, and it was an option for me to apply to the Portland, Oregon unit. And I went to training at about 25. So you ask about people later in life. After college, I did the football thing for 2 years, and then I was a flight instructor for a few years. So I had some previous time, some airmanship, and the things that really helped me to get that interview and ultimately the job. And at 25, at the time it was 27 and a half was the max age to get into pilot training. And I was just fortunate enough to get that opportunity even later in life.
Right. And now I think it's in the 30s, right? 31, 32, something like that, or
Yeah, it's 33 without a waiver and 35 with the waiver. And
oh, wow.
as you may not know, waivers are very hard to come by. They're under very special circumstances, and whether you know the right people or not. So for right now, just kind of call it 33. And I think it's be in pilot training by 33.
Okay. But there's always a chance, and I think that's something that a lot of TPN is active duty military pilots who are looking to go to the airlines. But what we're trying to kind of illustrate, and what your book does so eloquently, is there is an alternate route. It's not necessarily come straight out of college, go ROTC, or go to a service academy and then commission and start your active duty path. There's a whole Guard and Reserve aspect to the military, and it really is almost identical, if not identical, to the path that the active duty takes, with some huge advantages. What are some of the obviously, you got hired initially at the Oregon Guard. Tell us a little bit about that interview process and how that went, and then you also talk a little bit about your current unit and how you interviewed with them. I mean, I think that's an important lesson to learn, is how you go about even becoming aware of this world, let alone interviewing and getting hired.
Yeah, so kind of the biggest first step is you got to do your research. You got to understand what the Guard offers, what the Reserve offers, where the locations are, and the aircraft that are available. So for me, I was going to Oregon State. My wife's family was from Oregon. I'm a West Coast kid. My parents were in Las Vegas, and so I wanted to stay on the West Coast. And of course, I wanted to fly fighters. So that's the unit that I targeted, and those are the reasons why. The application process, I worked with a recruiter as an off-the-street hire. They helped schedule me for my testing. I have to take the FOQT and the TBAS, which gives me a PICSM score. And then The application packet, everything is on their website. If you go to the 142nd Fighter Wing, right now I think they're hiring as well. It'll show you all of the requirements that they want for an application packet, including letters of recommendation, a cover letter, a resume, college transcripts, and those kinds of things. So it's pretty much laid out, but what people don't know is, how to get that information. And so there's a lot of great resources on the internet. Just doing a simple Google search is great, but really what I tried to do with this book is to kind of point to one streamlined way about how to go about doing this process, from the research phase to all the way through the interview, and then also for people who are transitioning from the active duty, Palace Chase, Palace Front, and how that they can get in as well.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing that I appreciated about the book is it was very pilot. It was written by a pilot for a pilot, and it wasn't too in the weeds. It was exactly what I would need to know if I were unaware of this alternate route, this path, and wanted to go about doing that. And what I didn't understand when I was initially starting my active duty career is that the Guard and Reserve units, they're like little miniature families. But getting hired at one of those units is much like getting hired at any job. You call them up, you ask for whoever's in charge of hiring, and you fill out an application, and you go in for a real interview, to the extent where oftentimes you're wearing a suit and tie, or if you're coming off active duty, oftentimes they'll have you in a flight suit or uniform of the day of some sort. But it struck me when I interviewed at my reserve unit how formal it was, because we have a pretty informal unit, and it's a tight knit family. But the interview was no joke. You go in there and you have to prepare, and you have to have great answers and be able to talk about what you can contribute and what you can provide as a functioning member of that unit, and have a plan. So obviously, most of the people who are starting down this path are not going to fully understand what it means to be in the ARC, the Guard or Reserve, as opposed to active duty. Active duty makes sense. That's what you do full time, 24/7, 365. Yeah. You're on the hook for pretty much anything. And I got plenty of calls at 5:30 on a Friday night telling me 12 hours later I was going to be packing for hot and cold.
That's right.
Not exactly knowing where that was going to end up. But from your experience in two different kinds of units, what is the average lifestyle like for a Guard and Reserve individual, and what different kinds of statuses are there?
Oh my gosh, there's so much to it, so I'll try to keep it surface level. But in terms of the lifestyle, I was in the fighter community for a very short time, so I can't speak too intelligently about it. But what I do understand is they deploy like everybody else. They're on a rotation, and when their squadron's up, they usually deploy as a full squadron, and they'll go out to the desert for 3-6 months at a time. The fighter unit does a lot of exercises as well. They participate in a lot of the WIC graduations at Nellis. Some of the foreign relations with the NATO countries, they'll go out there for a couple of weeks and fly with them. Yeah, so I didn't have too much experience on the fighter side, but then I transitioned to the C-17. That community is active duty, notorious for being gone, right? Everyone's like, oh, like 300 days a year. But in the Guard and the Reserve, it's not like that. You definitely have the ability to say no to a certain extent. The missions are kind of thrown on our board, and it's first come, first serve. There's a lot of participation in our squadron, and so there's not a lot of voluntold opportunities to be had. We are also on deployment rotations. I think it's every about 1.5 years, our squadron comes up as eligible. Some flying, some non-flying deployments. Just kind of depends on what's happening at that point. Now, in terms of pay, as you come off of all of your training and you'll go fighter or transport, you'll go to what's called a prog tour. And it is money set aside for you to specifically learn how to fly your aircraft. And in the fighter unit, it was 2 years worth of orders. And however, on the heavy side, it was about 6 months. After that, you go part-time and you are just flying for currency. So that's anywhere from 5 to 7 days a month requirements within the squadron, either doing sims, flights, locals. You can sign up for missions, but for like C-17, I'll do a mission, usually typically 5 to 7 days in length. But that doesn't help towards my currency. That's just kind of extra money in my pocket. So we have a lot of flexibility with our pay statuses, but I kind of keep it kind of surface level. 5 to 7 days a month when you're part-time. There are full-time opportunities within the squadron, but they're very few. Right now, with the downturn in the airlines, those positions are all full. But once the airlines pick back up and the economy starts up again, there's typically full-time positions available in the squadron if that's something that they're interested in.
Absolutely. And you talk about that in the book. You lay that out pretty succinctly. And, just kind of the broad overview is a part-time reservist or a guardsman for that matter is the traditional 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year for a drill, or they call it annual tour. And then for air crew, they have additional in the reserves, we call them TEEPs or training periods. And that's where you get your aircraft currencies, you go into the sim, you do your ground training, and those sorts of things in order to maintain the exact same qualifications that an active duty pilot might in that same aircraft. And so it really is interesting because you're doing that completely full-time, part-time rather, as a traditional reservist or guardsman. And then there are the full-timers that you were talking about in the reserves. They're called ARTs, or Air Reserve Technicians. And then, in the Guard, they call them just technicians. And those are the ones, those are the full-time folks that are technically civilians that have an associated military position. Even though oftentimes you'll see them wearing their Air Force uniform all day long. So it was kind of one of those distinctions that took me a little while to figure out. But and that's a great opportunity for people who want to do that full time and kind of live in the same place. And that's the beauty of the Guard and Reserve is you can find a family, a unit that is in the place where you want to be, operating the aircraft that you'd like to operate, and you can plant yourself there and grow with that unit for 10, 15 years, an entire career if you wanted to, which is very, very different than active duty, where every 2-3 years you're off to a new place, new assignment, and it's constantly about growth and opportunity and kind of showing progression. Whereas the Guard and Reserve is all about maintaining proficiency in that particular airplane. So, in that mission. So when the mobilization is required, we're ready to go.
Yeah, and I had done both, to be clear. So I talk about the civilian employment within my book because I was an ART within my squadron. So after my prog tour, I was an ART for 2.5 years.
Okay.
Before I got hired with Alaska Airlines. And so I was the full-time guy making just a normal paycheck, doing kind of both jobs, the civilian side, working in the office, doing the scheduling, the pay, that kind of stuff, but also maintaining my military currency.
That makes sense. And so now as a part-time, as a traditional, and managing an airline career on top of that, how does that work out for you in terms of the back and forth? We've obviously got a lot of TPN members that do both, but the two dovetail nicely together. Tell us a little bit about how you manage your schedule and what that looks like. Current world situation and pandemic operations aside, what does that look like normal day to day?
Yeah, so we have the USERA capability with the military and the airlines to drop trips. So I'm still kind of figuring how the perfect scenario should play out for myself, but I'm trying to max perform and do it all without taking any leave. However, sometimes things come up. Also, our squadron is very flexible to where there's just not enough aircraft for us to come in during a UTA and everybody fly and get currency. And so we're not held to coming in every month on 2 consecutive days. They give us those pay statuses to use whenever. And so that really helps out with our flexibility as well. Typically, the airlines, I do have a line, so I'm flying 14, 15 days a month. Like I said, I'll do 5, 6 days myself with the Air Force, and currently not trying to drop trips and just kind of make as much money as possible. That's my personal choice. I know there's many people, and that's 1,000 ways to skin that cat, but that's kind of, I guess, my philosophy with the airlines and balancing it with also the family life.
Sure. And everybody's situation is different. Every airline is different. Every unit is a little bit different. So finding that balance and that balance can change from time to time too. Depending on the time of year, your family situation, or if you want to earn a little bit more that month, you go for max pay, and you want to be home for a kid's birthday, and you optimize for quality of life. There's always kind of that balance, and that's the beauty of having the 2 best part-time jobs ever, where someone else is paying you to go fly a high performance aircraft. I mean, you can't beat that.
That's right.
Yeah. So let's take a step back to the person who maybe has a little bit of flying experience, maybe have a commercial license, they've got their IFR, maybe they're working on their multi-engines or something like that, and they've got their maybe got their CFI, doing some instructing at a local FBO. What is the best step for them to kind of move into this and start looking into units and rushing those units, as it were, in order to be eligible and get all their ducks in a row? What's your recommendation for that?
Yeah, so I like to use it like there's 6 easy steps. There's researching the unit, researching what it is that you want, and you've talked about it. It's the opportunities are aircraft and location. Those are the 2 big things that the active duty can't offer you. So what is it that you're trying to get out of? Do you want to fly a specific aircraft, or do you want to live in a specific location, or is it both? With that information, you can search on the internet, you can look for units who have F-16s stateside, and you will get that information directly off the website. Now, the Guard and the Reserve are different, to where the Reserve is controlled by A3B. So it's just kind of like an umbrella organization that controls all pilot hiring, whereas the Guard is pretty unit specific. So if you want information about the Reserve, I can go on undergraduate flight training resource guide. I can Google that. It'll come up with a PDF. You save it to your desktop, and then there's attached documents. And on there, we'll have contacts to all of the Air Force Reserve squadrons. So once you've chosen 2, 3, maybe 5 units that you want to apply to, you have those contact information. You can contact the hiring manager, get the ball rolling on introducing yourself, finding out when the unit's going to do another application, submittal, interviews, so that you can now go backwards and say, okay, these are the steps I need to take prior to submitting that application. So then the next, we talked about unit selection. Talk to a recruiter. They really are a great help, especially for those off-the-street hires who don't have military experience. They're going to be that communicator for all the acronyms and the way the military does things, and kind of help break those things down. And then you want to get that testing done. The AFOQT is like an SAT style test, and you really want to focus on it. Don't just go in there and take it, maybe like you did in college with the SAT. Really take the time, get the study guides on the internet, Google, Amazon, they're there. There's 3 or 4 of them. But take about 6 months and study for that test so that you're ready and then you don't have to take it again. Because if you do have to take it again, your scores weren't good enough, you do have to wait 6 months. The recruiter will help schedule your TBAS. They'll also help schedule your AFOQT. And then, like we talked about, just really bringing it all together, getting the best packet ready for submitting to the squadron of your choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And a really important part of this process is going and visiting the unit and getting to know the people there. Even if you have to hop on a plane or drive a couple hours, just going there and spending some time with them is absolutely critical because they not only do they want to look at your background and your education history and your credentials, but they want to get to know you as a person as well because in the Guard and Reserve, you're going to potentially be in that unit for quite some time, and they want to make sure that you're a good fit for the culture and quite frankly that they want to go spend a couple of day TDY or an overseas mission or end up stuck in Diego Garcia for a month,
That's right. And like you said, it's a family, and they're bringing you into their family. And every unit is different. You can go across the country and go to several C-17 units, and everybody's going to be a little bit different. There's going to be the fun ones, there's going to be the serious ones, and everybody in between. And so, really take the opportunity to go meet those squadrons. It's a small investment in the rest of your life, and I really encourage people to do that. It is also kind of expected. They're not going to hire somebody who they haven't met, who they just kind of showed up to an interview. So contact the hiring manager, see when the next UTA is, when the next time everybody in the squadron, officer, enlisted, everybody's going to be there so that you can show face, meet everybody. Don't stick with the pilots, go to the enlisted, go to the support staff, talk to everybody because they're all going to report back to the hiring manager and tell you, pretty much give the thumbs up or the thumbs down.
Right. I can attest to that. Whenever someone comes to rush a unit and get to know everybody, it's going to be uncomfortable because everybody knows each other. They haven't seen each other for a month, and it's more of a social event combined with training than anything else. So it's going to be awkward. So just get comfortable being uncomfortable and make sure to meet everyone because if you don't make the rounds and just introduce yourself and even if you're introverted, just take the time to meet people and really let them get to know you a little bit. And the other thing I think that's important to mention is it's not unheard of to interview with a unit more than once because timing is really everything when it comes down to the number of slots that they can hire, especially if it's an off the street, they have to send them to pilot training. And it's a 2-year commitment before they end up actually, a deployable mission ready aircrew member. So there's a lot that goes into hiring a pilot off the street, and sometimes that's valuable because you have to grow the younger co-pilots and the new crew members just as much as bring in the old crusty active duty guys once their service commitment is up. So there's a lot of value to both ways. So don't get discouraged if it takes an interview or two and 2 or 3 drill weekends to kind of go out there and get to know them a little bit, if not more. And sooner than later. I know I've heard from multiple different units, and I'm sure yours is very similar. No one likes it when someone just parachutes in from active duty as a current qualified pilot in that particular airplane, just expects to get hired because of that. You got to put in some time and effort and really get to know that family and make sure that you're a good fit for them and that they're a good fit for you is important as well.
Yeah, and that goes, for anybody who's kind of thinking or thought about the military.
I think a lot of people consider themselves to not be eligible. They have some sort of issue like eyesight or medical situation. But as you mentioned in the book, there's waivers for everything.
Right.
I don't know. I personally have had the PRK laser eye surgery, and I was not qualified to be an Air Force pilot. and I got the surgery and was able to get that waived. I'm sure you probably had some injuries over a football career that make your medical file nice and thick as well.
Yeah. And so those are one of the two biggest questions I'm always asked is eyesight and age. And people automatically, vote themselves out and say, oh, I can't join the military because of eyesight. I think that's like a holdover from the 80s or 90s or something that is no longer true. And
There's
so
some time that isn't now, that's for sure.
yeah, so for those people who are thinking about it, it doesn't cost anything for you to at least try, up to going and visiting in a unit. But at that point, you should have already taken your test and known whether you're going to be competitive or not. It doesn't cost you anything to talk to a recruiter. You haven't signed a commitment to the Air Force until you're actually sworn in, and that won't happen until after you're hired with a Guard or Reserve unit. So it may take you several interviews to get the job, but if this is really what you want to do, go for it.
That's great. So, I think it's really important that you wrote this process down, documented your experience, talked about it in a pilot-proof way. And we talked about it before. I'm an audiobook kind of guy, and this is probably the first paper book that I've read in quite some time, probably since Cockpit to Cockpit, and even that I read on an iPad. But reading this was actually kind of fun because while I've been living this experience, it was nice to kind of look at it from a 30,000 foot view and see it all documented. And there were even a few things that I didn't necessarily know. So if someone wants to get their hands on Alternate Route, what's the best way to find you, find the book, and get in touch and reach out?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon. Easiest thing is just go on Amazon, Google Alternate Route. It should be one of the first 3 or 4 that pop up. And if you want to check out more information, I've got a blog on my website, also more information about myself. It's youralternateroute.com.
That's awesome. And we'll make sure to have links to that in the show notes and everything that you can find that very easily. So our guest is Jeff Van Orsow. Thank you so much, author of The Alternate Route. If you want to get a hold of Adam or myself, you can contact us at heyguys@thepilotnetwork.org. And a little bit something different. If you like the hat that I'm wearing, we just launched the .com website. So thepilotnetwork.com, you can buy this hat and a few others and support the network. And they go really, really fast. So by all means, stop in there and try to get one. And as always, fly safe. Keep the shiny side up and the dirty side down. And we'll see you next time. Take care, everybody.